Noam Chomsky quickly became one of my personal hero, and so I jumped at the occasion and visited Palestine. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it, and that's exactly how I felt after I visited Palestine.
Okay, so hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Book Cafe podcast. I'm your host Omar Nizam, and in today's episode, we will be talking about this book right here behind me entitled On Palestine, written by Professor Dr. Noam Chomsky and Professor Dr. Ilan Pappe. And my conversation partner for today's episode is the editor of the book, Mr. Frank Barat. So, Frank, first and foremost, welcome to the show. Salut, comment ça va?
Ça va. Thanks, Omar. It's a pleasure to be
Okay.
part of the show.
Okay, so thank you so much, Frank, for your time. I've been a really huge fan of all the work that you've done, specifically with regards to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I do appreciate you taking the time from your busy schedule to talk to us today. So, Frank, obviously, our viewers and listeners will be very familiar with Professor Dr. Noam Chomsky and Professor Dr. Ilan Pappe. And as I pointed out in the beginning, that you are the editor of the book. So, as the host of the show, I know exactly who you are. But for the sake of our viewers and listeners who haven't read the book yet and who may be discovering you as well for the very first time, do please take this opportunity to tell us just a little bit more about yourself.
Okay. So yeah, I'm actually French. You probably noticed from my accent, from the south of France. But I moved to London when I was 20 years old for work, and that's when my activism really started. Actually, my activism started just before that in Paris, through reading "Understanding Power," a book by Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky quickly became one of my go-to person for anything political, and he also became, in a way, one of my I don't know if you can call it this way, but personal hero. And so yeah, I moved to London, got involved with like Palestine solidarity groups, and very quickly, a friend of mine who was a physician told me, "Look, I'm going to Palestine on this like 10 days study tour of the region. We're going to meet Palestinians, Israelis, and we're going to learn more about the issue." And so I jumped at the occasion and visited Palestine for the first time in 2007. And the Indian scholar Arundhati Roy said something, I can't remember when or where, but she said something like, "Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it." And that's exactly how I felt after I visited Palestine for the first time. There was no way back for me. I was like, I met amazing people on the ground. They kept telling me that it was great for me to come, but my work was when I was going to be back in Europe, London, Paris, whatever. So from then on, like, Palestine became a really huge part of my life. Very quickly, I was involved, and I became the coordinator of an initiative called the Russell Tribunal on Palestine, which lasted for pretty much 8 years, and allowed me also to meet a lot of my, again, personal heroes: Noam Chomsky, Ken Loach, Angela Davis, Alice Walker, Stéphane Hessel, and from then on, yeah, I mean, Palestine became really a full-time job in a way, and nowadays, so I've done a few books, including on Palestine. I also did one with Angela Davis called "Freedom is the Constant Struggle." I'm doing these videos on YouTube, a bit like you in a way, conversations about political matters, and I'm also now trying to produce films and documentaries around the issue. So that's sort of me in a nutshell.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you so much, Frank, for that amazing introduction. So I think that the kind of work that you're doing is pretty incroyable, if I may say so. So let's get back to the book, Frank. And so the first question that I have is, was it because of your visit to Palestine in 2007, and then after that, your involvement in the Russell Tribunals? Is that how you got Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappe together for the first time to work on the book? Please do tell us a bit more about that.
Okay. So actually, this book is kind of a follow-up to another book. So when I became involved with Palestine in London, I was involved with the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and they had at the time like a magazine, I think it was monthly or bi-month or every 2 months, called Palestine News.
Right.
And I liked doing interviews. I don't have a background in journalism, but I just like talking to people and stuff. And I told them, why don't we try Noam Chomsky for an interview? And they were like, man, are you dreaming? And I was like, look, let's try it. So I sent him an email because you can find his email on internet. And he responded like the next day. I just couldn't believe it was him. I even told him, is it you or is it your PA? And it was him. So he responded. We did a short interview for Palestine News. And then I had an idea to put him in conversation with somebody else. And I knew Ilan as well, a little bit, because I was in London, he was in Exeter in the UK. So I told them, why don't we do a book together? And they accepted, which was for me completely unimaginable. And so the first book was actually called Gaza in Crisis, but it was Noam in his house or in his office and Ilan in his office responding to my emails and then responding to Noam's response, and Noam, etc. So we put this book together called Gaza in Crisis. But then a few years later, we were like, why don't we do this in a way properly? And we all meet, spend 2 or 3 days together and do a proper conversation. And again, they agreed, which was amazing. So Ilan and I flew to Boston and to the MIT, Cambridge. And we spent, I think, two days with Noam in his office, having actually a proper conversation. And that became On Palestine.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I have to say that it's a wonderful read. I have to say that I've learned so much just have you being the interlocutor between these two phenomenal scholars and having them have that interaction in the book and actually responding to each other. Yes, it's a phenomenal book, I have to say. So, yeah, absolutely. And so coming to the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there's this prominent Israeli author by the name of Yuval Noah Harari. He's the author of the book *Sapiens*, who stated very recently that in order to move forward, you have to forget about the past. But is that really the case, or is that really how we should be looking at it? I believe that both Professor Pappe and Noam Chomsky and yourself mentioned in the book that it is very important to put the history in context. We have to know about 1948 before we can come to a resolution of what is to be done. So would you like to elaborate more on that, specifically with regards to 1948?
Of course. I mean, I couldn't disagree more than with Yuval. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's crucial in any form of life, in a way, to understand, even in your personal life, in your family life, the past is a crucial part of it. And to understand the present, you need to understand the past. And to be able to work on the future, you need to also understand the present and the past. So, and that's actually why we actually cut the book in 3 parts: the past, the present, and the future. In a way, I think it's quite cynical and a bit too easy to say, even more so when it comes to Israel-Palestine, you have to forget about the past. I mean, if you tell me you have to forget about 3,000 years ago, the land belonged to the Jewish people and it was given to them by the Bible, I could agree, because 3,000 years ago is not actually the past. No one actually knows what happened 3,000 years ago. But the past for Palestine is 1948. It's a very, very recent past. We're not talking about even like the 18th century, the 19th century. We're talking about the 20th century. Mm-hmm. So the past is crucial to understand what's happening now. And it's crucial actually to understand what Israel is doing now in Gaza, And that's what Ilan's called it in his really amazing book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. Mm-hmm. This ethnic cleansing that happened in 1948. So when Israel was created, it's important to remember that 2/3 of the Palestinian population, around 700,000 people, were expelled from their land, either by force or by killing them. And these people have been refugees ever since, either in the diaspora, in Lebanon, including in Gaza. A lot of people living in Gaza now are descendants from people who were expelled from their land and their houses and their villages in 1948. So understanding the Nakba, which is the catastrophe that befell the Palestinians in 1948, is paramount to understand the present and potentially be able to work on a better future. And it's like, think about, the Aboriginals in Australia, that were a victim of, again, colonialism, ethnic cleansing, displacement, the stolen generation, the babies being put into like white people houses to turn them into better people, etc. Right. A lot of the Aboriginals in Australia have said, like, at least if the Australian state was to acknowledge what it did to us at the time, we would, it'd be a first step towards peace and justice, So I think it's crucial to understand the past. You can't avoid it.
Yes, indeed. And I would like to also bring another scholar into this discussion, Professor Dr. Benny Morris, whom, as you know, is somewhat of a rival to Professor Pappe in terms of their views. They're both considered new historians. But whereas, as you rightly said, that Professor Pappe in this book, as well as his other book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, states specifically that there was a conscious ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. Whereas Professor Morris seems to say that, well, it wasn't really a conscious ethnic cleansing. It was the fog of war that actually led to a lot of people leaving Israel. So what would be your take on this conversation, Frank? And how do you feel that the truth is somewhere in between the true, or do you feel that no, Ilan Pappe has got the narrative just right when it comes to 1948 and the Nakba?
I mean, I think it's a very easy answer easy question to answer, because historians usually base their scholarly work on facts. So what Ilan is saying is that 1948 and the so-called War of Independence, its purpose was to expel the Palestinian people. It wasn't the war that created as a collateral damage the expulsion of the Palestinian people. And he says this because he's basing his argument on facts, on the diaries of Ben-Gurion, on diaries of very high-level ranking officials in the Israeli army. But also, we have to remember that people talk about 1948, the so-called War of Independence of Israel, but by December 1947, a lot of massacres and a lot of ethnic cleansing had already happened. So about 6 months or 5 months before the war. So, and you just have to read again, it's important to, like right now, for example, a lot of statements are being made on behalf of like Hamas and Palestinian factions while they've never made them, but it's being repeated all over the media again and again and again. On the other hand, you've got Israeli officials, Israeli presidents, Israeli prime ministers, generals making public statements on TV, on radio, and no one is quoting them or mentioning what are they saying. And it's the same for 1948. Ben-Gurion clearly stated, we're going to act as if we were the victims, as if all the Arab states, with David versus Goliath, it's a war of survival. This is going to be what we're going to, but in private, he said, we're going to crush them. We know that we're superior military. We've got more people. All of the Palestinian leaders died during the first revolt of 1936, 1939 against the British Empire. It's a done deal. And by the way, we're never going to settle for Palestinian state. Eretz Israel, river to the sea, is the land of the Jewish people. Mm-hmm. So, and again, if you want to go back to from the river to the sea, the Palestinians are being accused of being anti-Semites and stuff. They're not saying we don't want any Jews in the land. They're saying to have equal rights from the river to the sea. The Jewish Israeli leadership is saying Eretz Israel, from the river to the sea, Jews only. So, but again, the media is turning this against the Palestinians. So I think Benny Morris, he came to the same conclusion as Ilan Pappe. There was an ethnic cleansing, but in a way he's saying, I'm not sure it was, something they wanted, and maybe it was necessary anyway. That's the kind of view which is just wrong on every aspect, I think, every level.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely that's an ongoing debate between these two stalwarts. And we would love to have them both go at it in an episode, and perhaps maybe you could host that on your
Mm.
YouTube channel. So that would be wonderful for people to actually decide for themselves that who has the better argument. So just moving on and coming back to the book, Frank, Professor Pappe mentioned a couple of paradoxes right in the beginning of the book. So I'd just like to touch upon one of them. And that is that the Israeli public at this point in time have a very favorable opinion of their own state, whereas the rest of the world has somewhat of a negative view. And perhaps there are some people in Israel who look at Prime Minister Netanyahu in a negative light, but overall, they seem to have a very positive opinion about their own state. Having said that, to what extent can we push this blame on the Israeli journalists for not giving a better picture of the on-ground occupation that's happening every single day since 1967? Like, for example, we were very lucky to have hosted Gideon Levy a couple of episodes back, and he seems to be the only one who has this integrity or this moral voice to speak out against the occupation and to document it for the last 40 years. Why do we not see more journalists like Gideon Levy reporting on what's actually happening in the occupied territories? What would be your take on that?
I mean, yes, obviously Gideon Levy is, an amazing person, an amazing journalist. There's also Amira Ahas, from Haaretz, that she actually lived in Ramallah for many years. She actually lived in Gaza for many years. But yeah, apart from them too, there's not many. But I recently did an interview on my YouTube channel with Nurit Peled, who is an Israeli scholar. Mm-hmm. And she actually studied the way Palestinians and Arabs were portrayed in Israeli school books. And what she came to the conclusion that from the earliest age, like as early as you can open a book and read a book, 6 years old, 5 years old, the Israelis are made to see the Palestinians as non-humans, dangerous, violent, and wanted to eradicate the Jews. So the brainwashing is happening and the propaganda is happening at a very, very, very early age in Israel. Also, the Palestinians, for anyone who's been to Palestine in recent years, and I haven't been, by the way, because I was denied entry in 2013 and barred for 10 years. So I could go back this year, maybe. Mm-hmm. The Palestinians have been made invisible. The wall, sort of, we hide them behind the wall. And they've been made completely invisible. So a lot of Israelis, like the vast majority, have never stepped foot in the West Bank. They've never crossed the checkpoint, except wearing an M16. So there is, a very important propaganda and brainwashing that is taking part at a very early age that makes the Palestinian non-humans and invisible to the Israelis. And there's also, for example, the fact, this rave, the party on October 7th, this dance party that was a lot of innocent people actually died, and that's horrible. But you really have a dance party about 2 kilometers away from what Norman Finkelstein calls a concentration camp. Mm-hmm. This is incredible, and this shows you the fact that the Palestinians are invisible. They don't really matter in Israeli society. Mm-hmm. So we're going to dance, party, take drugs 2 kilometers away from an enclave that has been under blockade. People struggling for food, for water, for 16 or 17 years. And, it really shows you the disconnect, really, in the Israeli society.
Absolutely. And yeah, that is quite an eye-opener. Like you said, I didn't know that it was only 2 kilometers away from the Gaza border. So that really shows that the Gazans were extremely invisible to the Israelis who were on the ground. So Frank, just moving ahead a little more, based on what I've read in the book and my understanding of the entire situation, I came to the conclusion that there's probably 4 possible options with which to come to a to come to a peace or to come to a resolution, basically. And so I'll just name them one by one. So the first solution would be one democratic state for both Jews and Arabs. Number two would be an ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian Arabs by the Israeli Jews. Number three would be apartheid, and number four would be genocide. Would you agree that these are the only four solutions that are actually in hand, and that only one of them is something that we can live with in the 21st century? What would be your take on that?
You know what, just for the sake of it, I would add the two-state solution, because even though I think anyone who knows about Israel-Palestine, including politicians that are still advocating for the two-state solution, know that it's impossible. It's still on the table. Biden repeated it about 2 weeks ago. We need a two-state solution, while he's made, and his administration and every administration before him, everything they could for the two-state solution not to happen. But I would agree. And I think, in a way, there's two solutions. One of them is equal rights for anyone who lives between, the river to the sea. So, like a normal, proper democratic state. Same rights, same access to health, education, food, housing, etc. That would be, like what Noam Chomsky calls like a one-state solution, or a binational state, and we've got examples of this. I live in Belgium, it's a state where like there is like the Flemish people and the French-speaking people, they live in the same rights, but they speak a different language, and they have different institutions, but they have the same equal rights. But for me, like what Israel is trying to do now, and what Israel has been trying to do since 47, is to turn the Palestinians into the Australian Aboriginals or the Indian Americans. I think they know that they won't be able to kill them all. The Palestinians will always exist in historical Palestine, but they want to make them they want to smash them so much. They want to make them so depressed and so and small that they'll be manageable. Let's you'll have a few enclaves. There'll be, instead of 2 million of you, there'll be like 400,000. We'll give you vouchers to buy food and alcohol, because I'm talking about alcohol. Indian Americans and Aboriginal, there's a major problem, and there you'll be forgotten. You'll be sort of Indian Americans or Aboriginals, even though obviously the Aboriginals in Australia and the Indian American in the US are still fighting, obviously, for their rights, but they've been sort of partly genocided. So there's only a few of them, in a way, remaining. So I think that's what Israel would like to do. I hope it's not possible. But we've seen now with what's happening in Gaza that they have really total carte blanche to do whatever they want, and we also know that the US could end this tomorrow if they wanted, and obviously the more just, fair solution would definitely be, same rights for all the people.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of carte blanche, Frank, I think you put it very aptly when you said that as long as the Americans are supporting Israel, they will not, stop whatever they're doing. And I think that in the book, it was Professor Chomsky who said that the only reason that apartheid South Africa lasted for as long as it did was because of American support. And it didn't matter what the rest of the world was saying, so as long as the American support was there. But as soon as it was removed, apartheid came to an end, to a huge extent. How far do you think that? How long into the future do you feel that it will take until the Americans stop, supporting all the carte blanche activities that Israel is doing? Do you believe that we'll see this happen in our lifetime, or is it very unpredictable to say when it may all come to an end?
I hope so. I hope we'll see this, in our lifetime. It's not sustainable. Israel is actually a problem for the United States of America. A lot of former CIA officials and stuff have said it. Higher-ranking security officials. Israel is becoming a problem for the US. And I think we see it like in the Democratic Party, the younger voters are opposed in like huge percentages, you know, like 70% are opposing what's happening in Palestine. So inshallah, you know, the new generation will change things. There's still a lot of work to do, like major work to do. But, you know, the work that, you know, organizations, including like Jewish Voices for Peace, for example, is doing in the US is crucial. And there's more and more and more of us. And that's what, you know, we need to keep hope and keep, and we need in a way to focus on the beautiful things that are happening. Because if we only focus on what's happening in Gaza, it can be soul destroying. It's too hard. It's too horrible. On the other hand, there are millions of people in the streets. There's more and more people coming out in support of Palestine. So it's got at one point or another to change things, you know. But right now, it doesn't. Or it does, but like drip by drip by drip. But, you know, the only thing we can do is keep going. You know, we owe it to the Palestinian people, you know, and we will stop when it's over, when apartheid is over. Until then, you gotta, you know, because it's, I keep repeating that, but I saw this young woman, Jewish activist from Jewish Voices for Peace, saying in an amazing speech she gave in New York, it's all of us or none of us. And I think, you know, as you know, we have to see ourselves as, you know, citizens of the world in a way, you know. And I think, you know, again, quoting maybe Nelson Mandela said, you know, we won't be free until everyone is free, you know, and including the Palestinian people. So I think that's what we have to keep doing.
Absolutely. And I think that's really well said, Frank. Okay, so we're pretty much getting to the end of our episode, Frank. But just before we let you go, we have as you know, that we're a podcast about books, you know, it's in the title. So we have a couple of staple questions that we usually ask our guests. So with your permission, I'll just ask you a couple of them. So the first staple question is, are you more of a fiction person or a nonfiction person? What genre of books do you enjoy reading?
Oh my God, this is like, I think I haven't read a fiction book in years. And I'm feeling really bad about, you know, and anyway, as activists, we owe it to ourselves as well to, you know, care is very important, you know, and we need to be healthy and we need to be, in a way, happy to be able to help others, you know, and to join the struggle. But I'll say, like, you know, 98% of the books I've bought and read, and actually I've bought a lot more books than I've read. I'm about 200 books late, you know, behind are nonfiction. Yeah. But I enjoy fiction. I think I read one in French about 6 months ago that I really loved. But then, yeah.
Okay, well, no, wonderful, wonderful. So yeah, I'm also very skewed towards the nonfiction side of it. I think I did a count of the books that I read in the last few years, and I found that at least 70% was nonfiction and 30% was fiction. But since you're in Brussels, Frank, let me just throw out a question related to fictional books. If you could pick your favorite fictional detective, who would you pick? Would it be Hercule Poirot or Tintin? So which of these two would you pick? Tintin, basically.
Yeah. It'd be Poirot. It'd be Poirot.
Okay.
Only because my wife loves Poirot. You know, every time, like, you know, we're in a hotel and there's TV, and then there's an old episode, you know, on Hercule Poirot on TV. She just loves it. So you know, and I just like his behavior, his mustache. He's, you know, it's kind of like clumsiness. So Poirot, yeah.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, and finally, the last question for the show, Frank, and let me just give a preamble. A lot of our guests have said that this usually is a very tough question, and that's the response I've been getting consistently from all of our guests. But I'm sure that you can give us a very good response to it. And the question is, if you could select a book that you feel that every young person should read at least once in their lifetime, what book would that be?
Wait, I have to find the right title. So all right. So it's funny you asking me that. It's obviously a tough question. And if I think about it for 5 minutes, there'll probably be 5, 10 books. But when you asked me the question, the first 2 books that came to my mind right away were Johnny Got His Gun by Dalton Trumbo, which is an anti-war book that was written early in the 20th century. So Johnny Got His Gun. But the book that came to my mind before that was Howard Zinn. Howard Zinn was a US historian that wrote a people's history of the United States of America. But his book called You Can't Be Neutral on a Moving Train was amazing. And I remember I read it a couple of times. Maybe the last time I read it was 10 years ago. And when I read it, I was like, this book should be in every school, in every university. You know, it should be part of the, you know, curriculum of people. You Can't Be Neutral on a Moving Train by Howard Zinn. Okay. So that'd be my book.
Awesome. Wonderful. Wonderful. So we'll have both those books in the description. And thank you so much, Frank, for indulging us with those answers. Okay. So at this point in time, let me just state that for our viewers and listeners who have been with us all this time, thank you very much for staying till the end. If you are watching this episode on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon. The episode will also be available on Apple, Google, and Spotify. So be sure to download it as well. Let me just grab the book from behind me. So the book, once again, is On Palestine, written by Noam Chomsky and Ilan Pappe and edited by Frank Barat. It's a fantastic book written by 2 fantastic scholars and edited by an equally fantastic editor. So please be sure to go out and buy the book. It's a fabulous book. It really gets you up to speed on what's happening in Israel and Palestine. Frank Barat, my thanks to you as well, sir. You've been a wonderful guest, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. I really learned a lot from this episode, and I continue to learn from you every single day with regards to all of your activities, everything you've done on camera, off camera, and I really hope that you continue to do this for as long as it takes to get freedom for the people of Palestine. So thank you very much once again.
Thanks a lot, Omar. I really enjoyed this as well. Thank you.
A biento.
Cheers. A biento. Bye-bye.
I am here, I am alive because the day that my Baba, my grandmother's entire family was massacred in a genocide, she just happened to be absent. And so I spent years and years agonizing over the question of where were the neighbors? Why did they just stand by? And so it is with all of my Jewish ancestors at my back, the one who survived and all those who didn't, that we say now, more profoundly than ever before, we refuse to be neighbors who just stand by. We are organizing right now the largest demonstrations of Jewish people in solidarity with Palestinian people in history. Because while they say it is these people or it is those people, we know what is true, what has always been true and what will always be true, that it is all of us or none of us. Well, I am here on behalf of hundreds of thousands of American Jews